Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to Roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. First question from today. Adam asks, "Hey Dan, I have a question. I've been taking 500 testosterone per week for the past 2 years. I recently did an 8-week Trenbolone enanthate cycle, 350 milligrams a week. Is there any reason I never got any of the gains but all the mental side effects? I've tried multiple different types of gear and I don't seem to respond well to them. I go to the gym 4 to 5 days a week and been progressing in all my lifts. I just seem to not respond to the gear and food. I got blood work done. My test is sitting around 1700. Okay, so first things first, 1700 is not going to be a level high enough for 500 testosterone. So if you're taking 500 milligrams of testosterone per week and your testosterone blood levels are only 1700 nanograms per deciliter, then the testosterone you're using is not correctly dosed. It's underdosed. And because a typical reading for 500 test is going to be about 3,000 nanograms per deciliter in your bloodstream. It can be higher. It can be a little bit lower, but it's not going to it would be very suspect to see a number under like 2,400 nanograms per deciliter on 500 milligrams of test. So that would make me think it's underdosed if it's lower than that. If it's around 2,500 to 4,500, it depends on the guy, how much blood level of testosterone you're going to get off of 500 tests. That's why there's room for it. It's not just one number. And I think that between 2,500 to 4,500 is where we're going to see on 500 tests, but not below about 2,500, because you can even get test levels like that on 1 milliliter per week, getting around 2,000 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone on legit test, properly dosed test. So the first thing I have to say is you're wondering why you're not getting, you don't respond to gear. Your body doesn't seem to respond to gear. Well, that's because the gear isn't high enough quality. So when I talk about like things like I don't, you don't have to use pharmaceutical grade, okay? But you have to be very cautious about the quality of the gear that you're using, because that is everything. But to ask, should you be getting the effects, like strong effects from 500 test, 350 Tren? Yes. That should not be a cycle where you're not getting really dramatic effects. And the reason for that is because Trenbolone is really strong. So when you have a testosterone cycle, 500, it'll be enough to support being on Tren. 500 Tren, 500 test, 350 Tren, you're going to get strong results, especially if you're a beginner. And so we're talking within a week, you're stronger, your muscles look different, and things are different for you in the gym. We're talking within a week. So for you guys where that kind of stuff doesn't happen, well, the gear, as long as you're eating 300 grams of protein per day, as long as you're going into the gym and you're working out in a way where you get better, where you get stronger over time, Where right now, maybe you're lifting on bench press, maybe you're lifting 225 for, maybe you can do that for 3 sets of 10 reps. All right. Well, when you are able to lift 315 on bench press for 3 sets of 10 reps, you are going to be a whole lot bigger. All right. So progressing in the gym and making your body weight go up, those are the 2 prerequisites that are not steroids. Okay, so you've got to be making your body weight go up, and you've got to be making these progress in the gym where you're lifting more weight, you're lifting more reps, and you're lifting more sets. All right, more sets and more reps with heavier weights, or increasing the weights. You've got to have that happen. And then your steroids is like a component of that whole system that supports that system. Okay, next question is from David. He says, "Hey Dan, your book Ultimate Guide to Roids was the blueprint. I finally have something going on that I don't think I've heard in your podcast. I've listened to every episode, a lot of them multiple times. I've been on 750 Test E for about 16 weeks and did a superdrol cycle starting at 10 milligrams and worked up to 20 milligrams over the course of about a 4-week cycle. Been off the superdrol for about a month. I've never really been estrogen sensitive and have gotten away with very little AI use. I have ran multiple testosterone standalone cycles at 750 milligrams. A few days ago, I noticed my nipples, and I remember you said that you shouldn't notice your nipples, that we bump into them all the time and never notice. Well, yeah, they got tender, and I was doing the pinch test, and I have fluid coming out of each nipple. More on the right. Jumped on Nolva, 40 milligrams a day, 25 milligrams Aromacin, and 2.5 milligrams Letrozole. Been about 3 days. Tenderness is gone, but the discharge remains. If I squeeze, it has gone from clear to yellow. For reference, it is only a few little drops that comes out. Any chance you can help me on this or give some advice? I don't feel any lumps or masses." Okay, so we got somebody here who's concerned about having a nipple issue on steroids. So the first thing that happened was they started to notice gyno developing, and it was estrogen gyno because they went on Nolvadex, Aromacin, and Letro, which are all anti-estrogens. And that was probably a bit overkill, but he's obviously a little bit upset about this. So you can see that that kind of overkill response was because, like, a bit upset about this. So the tenderness went away in 3 days, and that's good. But he says that there's some discharge that remains. And he says that when he squeezes his nipple, like a little bit of like water comes out. And he says that it used to be like yellow, and now it's clear. Or the reverse. I can't really tell from his message. But he says that there's a little bit of color to it and a few drops come out when he squeezes it. So I got to tell you right now that this is a question I get from time to time, but that I have never met another steroid-using bodybuilder who is not able to pinch the gland in his nipple if he has not had surgery to remove the gland, who has not been able to pinch the gland in his nipple and produce some kind of water response on the surface of the nipple. And so what you've got going on is you've just got high-ass levels of hormones. Because you're a steroid user, you got way more hormones going on than the normal person, okay? And your body is responding to this. The nipples are hormone-sensitive tissue, absolutely. And it's just being on roids in general causes this thing where if you dig in behind your nipple and squeeze that area back there, it produces a little bit of liquid and you can get a few drops out. And that doesn't mean that you have gyno or that you're developing gyno. As you can see, you got rid of your gyno response. There's no growth or mass behind the gland anymore, but there still is a little bit of drops coming out. And so you said that you normally don't notice it. And so I'm assuming you don't normally like check this thing either. So basically what happened is you started to get gyno, estrogen gyno, and then you started messing with your nipples and realizing that, hey, I can make stuff come out of this. And then you got rid of the gyno, but you still are noticing you can get something to come out of your nipple. And I just have to tell you that that's never going to go away. Unless you just stop taking gear altogether, that's going to always be there. Because I can tell you, Yeah, this is not something that a lot of guys are talking about too much, because this is another one of the unflattering side effects of using steroids. And people don't like to talk about the unflattering side effects of using steroids. So one of the unflattering side effects of using steroids is that when you are a man, you can pinch your nipple behind the gland and you can get a couple drops of liquid to come out at any given moment, on any given cycle, whatever you're doing. If you're using hormones, you can do that. So I'm glad to tell you that you got rid of the gyno. You're not having a problem. And, the water thing that you noticed does not mean that you have a problem. And no matter what you do, other than stopping gear altogether, it won't stop. So you can just ignore it from now on and move on. Next question is from Cade. Got a question for my missus. I've ordered some human growth hormone for myself, and after chatting to the missus about the benefits of it, she wants to know if she can use some too. I remember you recommending that women shouldn't really take steroids, but HGH isn't so bad because it's not a male sex hormone. My main concern is that she also has prescription dextroamphetamine for narcolepsy, and I'm wondering if they should be all right to be used together, and if so, how many IU per day would be an okay place to start. Okay, so yes, Clenbuterol and human growth hormone and thyroid are good PEDs for women to use because that is correct. They have no sex hormone effects, so they don't have masculinizing effects. So when women use steroids, male hormones, it changes the bones in their face permanently, makes them grow hair permanently, makes them grow something else permanently. And a lot of very, very incredibly unflattering side effects, okay? And these don't necessarily occur in the first 6 to 8 weeks of using it. But as we all know, no one does one cycle of steroids and then stops using them. So women who start and do one cycle of Anavar, this is not something where they're only going to use it for 4 to 6 weeks at 5 milligrams per day, and that's going to be the only exposure they have to in their life. Actually, you're opening up a Pandora's box, and there's going to be continual male hormone usage that's going to be going on for quite some time once a woman is introduced to that. So there are quick virilization side effects too, but the insidious virilization side effect is just the nature of using steroids and how anybody that starts using them doesn't just do one cycle. That is not how it goes. Once you start using them and you realize how powerful they are and what they can do for you, you do them again. And what they can do for you in the gym, because you're really into the gym, and that's the whole basis behind the whole thing. So you got to use these things to make the gym more fun. So yeah, that's the reason why I really discourage women from using steroids. But something like Clenbuterol, human growth hormone, thyroid hormone, not sex hormones. And so they don't have those kind of horrible permanent side effects on women. And so human growth hormone, 3 IUs per day is a good dose for women. Women are a little bit less sensitive to human growth hormone than men. So that's kind of an interesting thing. But 3 IUs per day is a good dose. And it can help with strength and muscle acquisition. And it can also help with fat burning. So when you're doing the growth hormone, you say your wife's got a prescription for dextroamphetamine for narcolepsy, and you're wondering about combining those together. So if we look at like possible side effects for amphetamine use, dextroamphetamine use, one is like heart remodeling. It's not very common, especially not at prescription dosages, but that's one of the side effects of possible side effects of amphetamine use is changes in heart structure, and size, thickness, etc. And with growth hormone, we also have something that kind of acts as a catalyst or a spark to help things grow. So if you use growth hormone and steroids at the same time before, you'll know that growth hormone kind of acts like a spark, and it helps things grow. It helps when things have stimulus to grow. Growth hormone provides a little more oomph or a little kick in the ass behind it to help it get going. So when you combine the dextroamphetamine that you're prescribed with the growth hormone, you're increasing your risk. You're increasing your risk exposure. And that's a personal decision whether or not you want to do that. How much risk you want to be exposed to. How many risk factors you want to stack on top of each other. That's what people have to decide for themselves. How much risk they're willing to be exposed to. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I don't think it's a huge risk, especially not for short periods of time, like a month of growth hormone use, 2 months of growth hormone use, etc. I don't think that's a large risk, in my opinion. And for people who are using it, not with stimulants, most people are okay with fairly long-term growth hormone use, provided they do some cycling and provided the doses stay at like 6 to 8 IUs per day or lower. Usually they come out of it pretty much okay. All right, so let's get to the next question here. Bobby asks, my question is, are there any stronger steroids, oral or injectable, that don't really put you in a bad mental state? My normal cycle is 750 to 1200 milligrams Sustanon plus 100 milligrams of Turinabol. I recently tried adding equipoise and it put me into a weird place mentally, questioning my relationship with my girlfriend, and she's incredible. So that was really odd. Thanks. Yeah, so the hormones absolutely affect your brain. Obviously, they go into the brain. And so put you in a bad mental state. You're feeling like you're more moody, it sounds like. So the kind of testosterone you're using, Sustanon, contains testosterone propionate and phenylpropionate, about almost 100 milligrams per milliliter of those two substances. And those two types of testosterone have special effects on the brain that the other types of testosterone don't, because of the speed at which they get into your bloodstream and peak. And so if you're looking like the way that you were thinking it would feel like to be on testosterone when you had never used testosterone before, if you would have started on testosterone propionate, then it would have met your expectations of what it was going to do for you, how it was going to make you feel, the energy it was going to give you, okay? But everybody starts on test E, test enanthate, or test cypionate, so you don't really feel those effects. But if you were on the propionate, you would have. So I have to tell you that just starting out here, you saying you have some mood issues and stuff with the steroids. So you are on a type of testosterone that has a more powerful, more direct and potent mental effects than other types of testosterone. And then the other thing is that, yeah, orals are pretty punchy, and they also really, amp you up. 100 milligrams of Turinabol is going to make you really feel like, your muscles are going to be a little bit tense even. You're going to have a lot of sympathetic nervous system activation, fight or flight activation, and your muscles even just resting are going to be like kind of harder and more tense feeling. And that's called an increased muscle tone. And that can be a desired effect. But it does show when that's happening that, yeah, the person's sympathetic fight or flight nervous system is showing an enhanced tone. When that system is more active. Its balance with the parasympathetic rest and relax nervous system has been disturbed. And if you look at an 80-year-old man or a 70-year-old man who is natural versus a 70-year-old man who is on TRT, there is a very big difference in the appearance there. And you can definitely see like energy and assertiveness and shit like that So the testosterone affects these things. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say there. So you're looking for something that might not have those effects. Well, Primobolan is usually that one. Anavar makes people bitchy. Anavar, orals in general, kind of have like that effect. Winstrol not as much. Winstrol doesn't have really negative mental side effects. Anavar definitely has a reputation for making people irritable and bitchy. Tren, of course. But then on the other hand, Deca calms people down. So I've talked about this before. Pro bodybuilders use a lot of Deca. We usually see pro bodybuilders looking very calm, not the way you'd expect somebody that was really loaded up on gear to be acting. And the Deca is a component to that. So we have Deca, Winstrol is okay, and then Primobolan definitely. Because, look, that's the good thing about Primobolan is you take that stuff, and while it does have a little bit of an amping up effect, it is so mild, and you're not dealing with up and down female hormones coming in and messing with your mind. There's no prolactin effects. There's no estrogen effects. It's just a plug-and-play steroid. Has slight DHT effects, slight stimulant effects, but it's anabolic. It gives muscle fullness, and it gives a nice cosmetic look with decreased water retention in the skin. So it grows muscle, it gives muscle fullness, gives a good cosmetic effect, and it doesn't have mental effects. So the reason why it's not more popular is probably simply because it's not that strong, and so the demand for it is really not that high. And look, when you take it, you can't really be expecting to notice anything if you're taking less than 500 milligrams per week. I mean, some people may be able to feel it less than that. And, I'd say after having used it a lot, yeah, I guess I can detect it in my body at lower doses than that. But it's really a background player at that point. To make it a foreground player, a minimum of 700 milligrams per week has to be used. But what really works is a vial a week, 1,000 milligrams of Primobolan per week. Now we've got the kind of firepower to do serious bodybuilding with, provided that we are combining that Primobolan with a comparable dosage of testosterone. So something like 1,000 milligrams of testosterone and 1,000 milligrams of Primobolan will be a very powerful muscle building thing going on there, okay? So a lot of misconceptions about Primobolan. It's not something that the average guy is using, but it's something that a lot of advanced guys are using. Not that it makes you advanced to use it, but just because they're sick of the shit. They're sick of the side effects. They're sick of, not feeling good, sick of maybe feeling irritable, something like that. So Primobolan is definitely the choice there for what you're asking. Okay, next question. Josiah asks, quick question. I have stanozolol, Winstrol injectable, and I've used about half of it, but it is ampules and kind of clumpy or jelly at the amp bottom and white milky. Is that normal? And after you mix your HGH, does it still need refrigerant? Okay, so inject stanozolol. Stanozolol is the chemical name for Winstrol. And so the inject version of Winstrol is the same chemical as the oral version of Winstrol. There is no chemical difference. The difference is that while one is prepared for eating it orally, the other has been prepared in a sterile solution for injecting it. But it's still the same thing. So if you get Winstrol into your body through putting it in your mouth or taking an injection, you got the same chemical in your body. If it's injected, it lasts longer, lasts about twice as long. So you need to take it every day if you're taking it orally for it to work right. But if you're taking it injected, then about every other day is fine. And about half the dose of Winstrol inject will have the same potency as about, double the dose of oral, because of how long the inject Winstrol stays in your system and it builds up. It doesn't go up and down as quickly. So that stuff, when it's prepared for injection, it is almost always put into water. So it's a water-based injection. These days, sometimes it's in oil. And that would be a different story. But the typical way that it's made, and the way that yours is made, is using water. So what you have is you have that white stuff that you're seeing in the vial, in the ampule, and that is hormone crystal. That is the hormone Winstrol itself, and it's separated from the rest of the inactive ingredients in that ampule. So if, I don't know, you said it's clumpy and white and kind of like gel-like, so that needs to be dissolved, and it needs to be taken as the shot with anything else that is in there, because that clumpy stuff is the active ingredient. That is the Winstrol. The rest of the stuff is carrier stuff to get it into your body. And the last part of your question was that, do you need to keep human growth hormone in the refrigerator? And that is yes. Human growth hormone, whether it's reconstituted or not, should always be kept in the refrigerator. So this is a very fragile protein, and it degrades when it's shaken. If you shake it hard, it degrades if it's kept too long in a vial, even in the refrigerator. If it's kept in there for over a month in bacteriostatic water, or only a week in sterile water, sodium chloride water, because the very, very, very small amount of bacteria that still is in that vial actually will start eating the human growth hormone and digesting it and destroying it. So the bacteria will actually destroy the human growth hormone. And that's also why it cannot be left outside the fridge. When it's in the fridge, the reduced temperatures make it an inhospitable environment for bacteria to be growing in. But if you have it warmer, then you have an environment where bacteria are more happy. So just general conditions of growth hormone storage is for it to always be kept in low temperatures. And that's that. Don't let it out of lower temperatures. Be careful with it. All right, next question. Hi, Dan. Great fucking show. My question is about veins. I always see bodybuilders with huge veins. Unfortunately, that's not the case for me. I have very small veins. I'm not a small guy either, at 6'3", 230, and about 15% body fat. But my arms just look smooth, like there's no veins. This is a big problem when getting blood draws and giving blood for high hemoglobin or hematocrit. About 50% of the time, the nurses can't even get it to work when I try to give blood. It's painful and very frustrating. So veins do kind of like grow as a bodybuilder grows, as a bodybuilder gets bigger. And then using growth hormone causes new veins to grow. There's a proliferation of veins that happens especially when someone uses growth hormone for the first time, and especially on the lower body. So like on the quads is where this is the most noticeable. Is most people before they've used growth hormone don't really have a lot of veins on their quads. But after having used growth hormone, most people have spiderweb veins all over their quads. So this is most prominent in this area. But growth hormone can definitely help with vascularity. But the main thing is that having a low body fat, you may be holding more body fat in your arms and other places. You say you're 15% body fat. So people hold they hold their body fat in different areas. Some people hold it on their legs. Some people hold it on their stomach. Other people hold it on their back. Some people hold it on their chest, some on their arms. The body does not hold body fat evenly, top to bottom. And so, look, there is vascularity in your skin. And if the skin was thin enough, that vascularity would be showing. You may have smaller veins, they may not be wide garden hose veins, but there are definitely veins in there. And if the skin becomes thin enough, they will show. Like, a good way to just look at it would be make sure you're warm, not cold, because that makes veins less visible. And then, look at your feet, or the tops of your hands. Those are places where the skin is very thin, and there's a very low body fat in those areas. And there should be visible veins in those areas. Another spot is that people have veins on their dick, okay? Because there is no body fat there. It doesn't develop there. And so you see veins there. And so that's the case for your whole body. When you get lean, the leaner you get, the more veins show up. Because we all have, a vascular network in our skin to support that tissue. So there are veins there, and there is blood flowing there. And getting the skin thin enough that there is nothing around those veins, putting padding around them so that you can't see them, exposes them. So getting super lean out of anything is the best way to become more vascular. Probably second place is using growth hormone. And, there are also certain steroids that have a reputation for vascularity, and they do make you more vascular when you use them. Something like Winstrol, something like Trenbolone, even Anabar. You become more veiny when you're on those. But that pretty much goes away when you come off. But the growth hormone veins don't ever go away when you come off. Those, once you've developed those, especially on the legs like we were talking about earlier, those are pretty much there for the rest of your life. All right, so let's get to the next question. Thanks, everything allegedly. Kenny asks, hey Dan, thanks for all you do. The book Ultimate Guide to Roids is great. Question pertaining to PCT and TRT while off cycle. You speak a lot on taking HCG or Clomid to regain testicle size or to stay fertile. Well, I am one who really doesn't care about keeping my testicle size, nor do I or my wife plan on having more kids. So speaking to someone like me, as someone who takes 200 milligrams test while off cycle as TRT, what should I be doing as a PCT, if anything, after my larger cycles? Or is going back into TRT program enough? For background, intermediate lifter for 15 years, not competing ever, 5'9", 195 pounds-ish, low body fat. Cycles are simple, test 800, Primo 500, Anavar, Arimidex is needed, and sometimes one time a year I'll throw in a Winstrol or superdrol at mediocre doses. Okay, so basically you're wondering, since you don't plan on having any more kids and you don't need to be fertile, you're wondering, like, do you need to do a PCT? Because you're on TRT, and so you do your cycles, and then you go back to TRT afterwards. But you're wondering if there's something you're missing out on not doing, a PCT, like you hear about talked about online or something. And so the reason for doing the PCT is to restart the natural reproductive system, is to enhance fertility, testosterone production, endogenously, inside yourself, sperm production. And you're going to have to expose your system to medications, drugs, to cause that to happen, to do a PCT. So all the medications have side effects. And it's healthier to usually a lot of times, it's healthier to not use medicine than use it. So if you are not needing to be fertile and not needing to have any kids ever, it wouldn't really make sense to make your body go through having PCT drugs put into it, because that's going to have a bit of a stress on your system. And, if you're just going to go shut it right back off again next cycle, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Which is why, and I think that PCT, other than when somebody wants to like stop using gear, it's kind of a joke. Because like we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about the girl that wanted to, or we were talking about steroids with girls or whatever, it's like people don't do one cycle. So really, like people go on cycle, and then they're, if they're really into bodybuilding, they're like mostly on cycle until, they decide that they're going to make like a lifestyle change. Yeah, there's off cycle times and stuff, but you're mostly on cycle. And when you're off cycle, you want to be back on cycle, because the bodybuilding is like the big focus in your life. Let me reorganize my thoughts here. Yeah. So I wouldn't take Clomid. I wouldn't take Nolvadex, like PCT drugs. But if you do want to have like some fertility still, or you want to create endogenous testosterone, there's really no harm in taking HCG whenever you want, whether you are on cycle or off cycle. HCG is an analog of luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is the hormone that your pituitary gland sends to your testicles and tells them to produce testosterone and sperm. And so HCG as an analog of luteinizing hormone has the same effect as luteinizing hormone in the body. HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. It's created from purifying pregnant rats' urine, because rats and mammals produce HCG when they're pregnant. Actually, the pregnancy test for humans is an HCG test to see if the urine of the woman has HCG in it, if she's producing that. And so, kind of funny that you're injecting a purified urine from rats, and that's what makes you fertile. But it does. So, that one, believe it or not, really not toxic. Sounds, I just told you that little bit about how it's made. That might made you think it's toxic, but it's not. It increases your estrogen conversion, taking it. But what's really cool is you can take it on or off cycle. You can take it when you're on cycle. You can take it off when you're off cycle. You can take it both. You can take it year round. And taking that stuff, 500 IUs twice per week, it's going to keep your natural reproductive system on a little bit. So maybe 50%, 70%, but it's going to be functioning. You're going to be creating natural testosterone. You're going to be creating sperm. And some people just like to do that all the time. They like to do that constantly while they use gear, and I think that's fine too. So if you were going to ask me if I think you need a PCT instead of TRT, I'd say no. But I'd say if you want to create a natural test and sperm, then take HCG. All right, next question. Eli asks, I love the show and your book, Ultimate Guide to Roids. I was wondering, how do you not get adrenaline gland shutdown? Okay, so the pituitary, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, is the stress response system. And it is very reactive to stress, and it secretes hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that alter your body under times of stress. Cortisol is a catabolic breakdown of tissue hormone. And what happens when that goes into the bloodstream is the first thing it does is it metabolizes fat. It makes fat from the fat cells go into the bloodstream, and then your body can use that as energy. Now, if we have elevated cortisol all the time, we're not just having pulses of cortisol and normal pulses of cortisol. You can see how having a catabolic hormone that breaks down tissue would be totally negative. So that would be like HPA, adrenal axis dysfunction, which is what we don't want and what you're asking about. And that is caused from stress. That's what it's caused from. It's causing from the organism being under stress for a prolonged period of time beyond their ability to cope with it. And eventually, there is exhaustion and there is dysfunction of your sympathetic nervous system, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction. And it can be pretty disruptive. Can cause depression, anxiety. Most people with depression have chronically elevated cortisol, and obviously that has a bad effect on bodybuilding. And it's anecdotal and true though that bodybuilders during their contest preps, when they're the happiest and they're feeling the best, they're the most optimistic, they're not feeling a ton of pain and suffering, that's when they bring their best packages. That's when they look the best. And it's because you cannot overcome these hormones, man. If you have a bunch of cortisol in your blood and it's elevated all the time and it's counteracting the effects of testosterone, it's causing a breakdown response in your body of tissue. Dude, that's so when there is a mental aspect to this, there is a mood aspect to this, and it affects your hormones. Just like there is a food aspect to this, where where eating carbohydrates controls the hormone insulin, and insulin is what controls weight gain and weight loss. So there's this also mental aspect of it, where if the person is under too much stress for too much time, whether that be physical stress, emotional stress, or a combination of those, they will get hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction, which will hurt their bodybuilding. And we see that. Okay, next. Well, okay, actually, let me say one thing, how to fix it, okay? Before I move on, is that antidepressants definitely fix it, and just being out of the stress scenario will fix it. So being out of the stress scenario would be the first thing. And if the person is unable to adapt and feel okay, then antidepressants in order to get to a point where you're able to adapt enough to feel okay. That's how to get the cortisol to come down and resolve the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction. Okay, next question. Jay asks, Dan, love the podcast. My coworker and myself put it on the Bluetooth radio at work while welding parts for hydroelectric dams. It's pretty cool. Was wondering if you could shed some light on DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, and if it's beneficial for a guy on TRT or a small blast of, say, 350 milligrams test. Does it indeed increase estrogen levels like I've heard? Yeah, in men, it increases estrogen levels more than it increases testosterone levels. So dihydroepiandrosterone is a precursor hormone in the production of testosterone. But it is before testosterone and estrogen. So in that it's a prohormone, it can be transformed into either testosterone or estrogen. When women take dihydroepiandrosterone, it mostly goes to testosterone. And when men take it, it mostly turns to estrogen. And it is a steroid that has effects in the nervous system. It is a hormone that has effects in the nervous system and can have effects in calming one down. However, I don't think that DHEA has a noticeable effect when someone is on testosterone. And this is my anecdotal opinion from experience is that, taking those DHEA tablets, taking those capsules doesn't make a difference. That's what I've seen. I know some people say it does make a difference, and for some people it may definitely make a difference, but I also have to be a little bit skeptical in what bodybuilders say they feel or whatever. Or a lot of times when you really look into these things, sometimes people make these proclamations that they feel things or whatever, which is totally arbitrary. And they'll make these proclamations after like 7 days or after like a week and a half or something of using something when they're pretty excited about it. And I just can't take that compared to my personal experience and experience with others where we haven't noticed that this is a big thing, that this is something that changes the game or even makes me feel different noticeably, makes a person feel different noticeably. Haven't noticed it. However, have noticed that HCG does this. HCG makes your body produce these prohormones, these intermediate chemicals, and it does have an effect on well-being. Like for example, the first effect of taking HCG is libido going up. So it definitely affects your mind to take HCG, and gives these precursor chemicals, these prohormones. And so in my experience, taking the HCG is the way when you're trying to get these effects of like, okay, well, I'm on testosterone, but I don't have these prohormones anymore. I just have this downstream target hormone. And so maybe some places in my nervous system or my brain aren't receiving the right hormone stimulation they need because they might need these prohormones. And in my opinion, taking HCG is the way to deal with that, not taking DHEA tablets. Okay, next question. Brad asks, been listening to you for months and I'm getting swole. I need your advice. I'm taking insulin type R, okay, rapid insulin, 10 IUs in the AM, then 10 IUs post-workout. Should I keep bumping it up? I'm also taking human growth hormone to 3 IUs. I use at night. Testosterone enanthate, 750 milligrams, NPP 300 milligrams, D-ball 20 milligrams every day, MK677 50 milligrams a day, HCG 500 IUs twice a week. Arimidex on hand if my ankles look a little swollen. He's been on for about a week and a half and went from 200 to 214 pounds, trying to get as massive as possible. Okay, so you're trying to get as massive as possible. So you got the insulin going on, and that's basically your question here is you've noticed you said you're taking 10 IUs of insulin pre-workout and another 10 IUs of insulin post-workout. So you're noticing that made you bigger and you're wondering if you should take more. So insulin, I was just talking about it in the last question. It's released when carbohydrates are eaten. And what insulin does is it clears out the bloodstream. Whatever energy, whatever nutrients, etc., are in the bloodstream are going to be absorbed by the cells. And the cells are going to take those in and empty the bloodstream out. Okay? So that's insulin's job as a transport molecule, getting whatever is in the bloodstream out of the bloodstream and into the cells. So when you take that pre or post workout, or when you eat like a intra-workout drink, you have an intra-workout drink and you're taking in dextrose during your workout or glucose during your workout, which is causing an insulin release. Well, during that very sensitive time during the workout where your muscles, your tissues are more sensitive than normal to nutrition uptake, then you're slamming it with this thing that pushes nutrition into cells. And so during that specific special time, that pre-intro post-workout period, your muscles have an enhanced ability for absorption of nutrients. And so some bodybuilders use insulin during those times in order to take in even more nutrients during those special sensitive times and to really just shove them into those cells like a pile driver with that insulin, really maximizing that pre, intra, post workout time to really load up the muscle. So the drawback of this is that when you add insulin to your bodybuilding, you're increasing the risk exposure of your bodybuilding massively. Because whereas with testosterone or growth hormone or something, if you take too much, it might make you sick. It might make you have high blood pressure. It might make you have a bunch of water retention or feel terrible. But with insulin, if you get the wrong dose, it can kill you. And even just one time. And so when you go from using something like steroids, using like something like testosterone that doesn't have that kind of catastrophic effects when you mess up, and then you add things, you start adding things like insulin or DNP, etc., and you're adding things where if you mess up with them, now you can die. You've just increased your risk exposure in bodybuilding, like massively. You've massively increased your risk exposure. So that needs to be something that people are totally aware of when they make these decisions. So that's why I talk about that when I talk about insulin, is to make sure that the guys who are using it know to be super serious with it and super careful with it. And then also to just let people know that are thinking about using it that, hey, this is a super serious thing, and it's really taking your risk exposure and moving it to a new level now of like how badly you could possibly get hurt if you mess up with your bodybuilding. So it's risky stuff. And the other thing is that while it is probably the most effective substance, period, in getting big, it's the hormone that causes weight gain. Using huge amounts of it really doesn't make a bodybuilder look good. That's what modern bodybuilding is. It's using huge amounts of insulin with high doses of growth hormone. And that's the difference between golden era bodybuilding and modern bodybuilding. Whereas little bits of growth hormone and no insulin and large amounts of steroids were used in golden era bodybuilding. Now what's popular is super doses of insulin, super doses of growth hormone, and medium and high doses of steroids. So 5 IUs of insulin pre and post workout is just about maxing out what it can do for you as like a PED. And when you take more than that, now you're kind of making things a little weird. Because the IGF-1 levels, when combined with the growth hormone, when you take insulin, get so high. And so that causes things like acromegaly symptoms, and like things to grow, bones to grow that shouldn't be growing, stuff like that. High insulin combined with reasonably high growth hormone that's like acromegaly inducing. It's an acromegaly inducing thing to do. And then the other thing is that the quality of insulin muscle does not have the quality or the texture or the appearance or the hardness to the touch, look factor, polish kind of factor. This is subjective, what I'm saying right now. It doesn't have that compared to the lower insulin use bodybuilders who are not using as much insulin. Their muscle has a different quality to it, has a different appearance to it, has a different texture to it. So what I'm trying to say is that insulin is going to be the prime factor that decides whether you have a modern or classic looking physique. And while small doses of insulin, like 5 IUs or 10 IUs, can be still used successfully and not ruin a guy's look, once you start getting higher, like 15 to 25 IUs, well, now guys' looks do start getting messed up over time. Things just start getting weird. People start looking like they've got turtle shell guts. People get heart disease and stuff like that because having high insulin levels is horrible for your cardiovascular system. It causes inflammation in the veins and arteries. So another thing we notice is that the golden era bodybuilders generally lived till like 75 years old. And the current bodybuilders generally live until like 45 or 50. And it seems like they keep on having heart problems. So there's a concern there. And that's why I think that insulin use should be kept low. It should be kept controlled. So 5 IUs of insulin pre or post workout, or 10 IUs of insulin pre or post workout. Guys are doing that. And I don't see guys having terrible side effects from doing that. But so that's the reality of bodybuilding, is that is going on, and that these guys are also seriously increasing their risk exposure when they do that. So just everyone know that insulin in bodybuilding is a very serious thing. It does make a person bigger, but it's a complicated subject matter in that it's the substance that's responsible for the current look in modern bodybuilding from abusing insulin, and then that it also increases your risk exposure in bodybuilding a lot using it. So it's one to think a lot about. Okay, next question. Clark asks, I'm 48, 245 pounds. I'm running 1,200 milligrams testcypionate and 600 milligrams trenbolone acetate. The sexual effects of the Tren at this dosage in the beginning are amazing, but towards the end of the cycle, it becomes hard to maintain an erection and coming becomes impossible. Will HCG combat this, and what dosage would you recommend? Well, I don't think HCG will help, but cabergoline will, because what's happening is that your prolactin is being elevated from using the trenbolone. 19-nors elevate prolactin. And when prolactin elevates, dopamine goes down. And when dopamine goes up, prolactin goes down. So they're counterbalancing hormones. They have opposite effects in the body. Prolactin is like an anti-dopamine hormone, and dopamine is like an anti-prolactin hormone. And so what your prolactin is raised, which is suppressing your dopamine, which is then suppressing your libido, suppressing your sex drive. And what you have to have happen is you've got to bring that prolactin down so the dopamine goes back up and your brain functions normally again. So cabergoline and pramipexole are two dopamine agonists that are used by bodybuilders for this purpose. Pramipexole can make you sick if you take too much of it too soon. And so and you've also got to take it every day too. It's a daily use one. Whereas cabergoline doesn't make people sick, and you only have to take it twice per week, so less frequency. However, taking these dopamine agonists, when people use them at high dosages long term, or when people take huge lifetime cumulative dosages of them, they can cause serious side effects. So these are, again, not something, that someone would want to take a risk on overusing or abusing. This is not the one to choose to do that with. So again, there's a caution there. 0.5 or 0.25 milligrams of cabergoline 2 or 3 times per week would be commonly how bodybuilders use it. And the bad side effects that I was talking about earlier that are possible from high dose, prolonged use, or total cumulative lifetime dosage. So we're talking like over like 4 milligrams per week of cabergoline being used, or 300 milligrams plus total lifetime dosage being used. People who fall into that category, there is a correlation with heart valve changes or changes to the heart, and that exists. And so it's definitely, again, something you don't want to be messing around with. Those effects haven't been shown to be used to happen on low dose use like we do in bodybuilding, or low cumulative lifetime use, which shouldn't be on Tren year-round. Shouldn't be on Deca year-round.
All right. So that's going to be the last question for the podcast today. It was fun talking to you guys, and I'll be coming up with another episode for you guys real soon here. So make sure to go pick up Ultimate Guide to Roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. You know, if you just go to bodybuilderinthailand.com, it's I think it's the first article on the homepage where you can check it out and read like 20 pages. It's definitely worth it. It's my best content. You know, if you like the podcast, the book will blow you away.